Good morning. I'm Greg Lui-Kwan. This morning what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a series of boards from my collection that tell the story of the Hawaii shortboard revolution. I'm going to start first by giving credit to Joe Quigg and the balsa shortboard he made for surfing Malibu. It's called a Dallin board. But we're going to go straight up to the 1966 World Championships won by Nat Young in San Diego in the fall of 1966. After Nat Young won that contest on a 9.4 surfboard made in Australia, I think by Gordon Woods, but I'm not 100% sure. All of the manufacturers in California and Hawaii took notice, and they started producing boards in the 9-foot range, which prior to that was in the 9.6 to 10-foot range. And the board that Dick Brewer, who was working out of Hawaii, designed for Bing surfboards back then, was a Bing Pintail Lightweight. This board was designed in 1967. And it's 9 foot. Construction is 5-part stringer, and it features a tiger stripe psychedelic lamination on the bottom, which was very popular back in 1966 and 1967. Bing had another series of surfboards for those the more modernized version of the Bing New Haven Nose Rider, but that preceded this model, which was made in 1967. I'll turn the board over so you can see the tiger stripe on the bottom. The restoration was done by Randy Rarick about 15 years ago, and it's got a first generation wave set fin box. And the laminate or the label was one that was left over from the 1960s that Randy had in his stock and was gracious enough to put in this board that he sold to me. And that's it for this board. In the winter of 1967, Bob McTavish, Nat Young, George Greno came to Hawaii by storm, and they surfed on Maui, at Honolulu Bay, and at Sunset Beach and elsewhere on the North Shore of Oahu. In sometime in the middle of that month, Bob McTavish went to the Lahaina cannery and met with Dick Brewer. At the time, Brewer had been in the process of shaping 2 longboards, Bing pipeliners, for his team riders, Gerry Lopez and Reno Abellira. He had finished shaping Reno's Bing pipeliner and was about to shape Gerry's when Bob McTavish and his team showed up. And those two got to talking, and this is one of the most important events and represents, I think, the epicenter of the Hawaii shortboard revolution. As they were talking, Brewer took a saw and cut 1.5 feet off of Gerry Lopez's blank. Gerry freaked out, and what resulted was the first modern shortboard Hawaiian called a pocket rocket back then. When the documentary on Bob McTavish was done about 4 or 5 years ago by a New Zealand filmmaker whose name I don't recall, he did a great job, but he's since passed. They did a recreation of the shaping of Gerry's Bing pipeliner, and Bob finished shaping it, and both Dick Brewer and Bob McTavish put their labels to the board, which I have right here. The Bluebirds label is a vintage one that Bob McTavish used back in the 60s, and the 2 lay labels are those of Dick Brewer. Because I was able to assemble a few surfboards representing the Hawaiian shortboard revolution, after the board is finished in glass, it was given to me, so I have it now. Now in 1968, Brewer moved from Maui back to Oahu, and he shapeboards out of the Surfline shop, which was on Piikoi Street near Kapolei Boulevard. And there were two labels that he used during that time. One was a simple chevron pin line, which is shown in this board here with his signature. And Gerry Lopez also did boards with the same kind of chevron pin line, and those are sold at the Surfline Surf Shop, which was owned by Fred Schwartz back then. The other label that was used throughout the entire year, but mostly during the summer and towards the end of the year, was one that's called the Hanapepe Surf Shop. And I think some of those may have been actually shaped on Kauai by Kimo Green, Dick Brewer, and Gerry Lopez. Gerry and Kimo were go-shapers for Dick Brewer at the time. And I have a sample here of that label. In November of 1968, the World Contest was held at Puerto Rico, and Nat Young showed up with, I think, a 5'8" surfboard and didn't do that well and didn't make the finals. David Nueva also didn't make the finals. He had a kind of a modern pintail Hawaii pocket rocket. And Reno Abellira made it to the finals on, I believe, what was a 6'7", 17-inch wide Dick Brewer board under the label Hanapepe Surf Shop, and it had a very distinctive name, Le Serpent Plastique. And although Reno placed last in the six-man final, to me it was Reno's performance that marked the beginning of the modern surfing era. His style is very, very modern. He surfed very high in the pocket. And his position is magnificent. The contest was won by Fred Hemmings on a board shaped by Ben Aipa, who was a team captain for the Hawaii guys. The very first versions of the Hawaii minigun, which is what it's called, were designed after the Buzzy Trent Dick Brewer, Hobie Dick Brewer gun, which was designed in 1965. And the earliest versions of the Hawaii minigun featured a kind of a boat nose, kind of like a canoe bottom, as opposed to a flat bottom, which is more common now. This produced a rail configuration that surfboard designers refer to as an S-rail, low in the tail with a breaking edge, and a kind of a boat hull in the front. So as you look along the rail, you can see that the chine, or the outer edge of the surfboard, rises, so that when you get to the nose, it's at the top, and that's called an S-rail. Now, the S-rail was particularly troublesome. About 15 years ago, I had a conversation with Joey Cabell, and Joey had been a team rider for Dick Brewer, and Joey tried to talk Dick Brewer into shaping boards that were down rail, but Dick wouldn't have anything to do with it. The year would have been 1968, early 1969. By 1969, everything gets turned on its head by Mike Hynson. But in the meantime, Joey told me that he eliminated the problem he was having with riding big Hanalei 20 foot plus by making his own surfboards. And he made a couple of surfboards, one of which he won the Duke Hanamoku, I think it was in the mid-70s, on something called the Gray Ghost. Now, next I'm going to show you a piece that belonged to Johnny Gale, the owner and founder of Rainbow Surfboards, shaped by Mike Hynson. One of the top surfboard shapers in the 1960s was a Californian named Mike Hynson. Mike is still out making surfboards. And Mike first became a celebrity because he was one of the two surfers who traveled around the world with Bruce Brown in 1964. And they produced a movie called Endless Summer. Now, in 1969, Mike designed, most people say, the down rail surfboard. And here's an example of that board. Mike Hynson and Johnny Gale founded a surfboard company in 1969 called Rainbow Surfboards. And there are a number of Rainbow Surfboards still in existence, but very, very few were owned by Johnny Gale. I have one here that was that's inscribed on the tail of this board. And this particular piece is 8 foot 4 inch, and there was another one that sold in 2003 that's owned by Fernando Arguer, but he's one of the top collectors in the world, and he has one very similar to this that's 8 foot. This particular board has a design feature in the nose that allows for the placement of a lead fishing weight. Now, the idea was that the weight would allow the surfboard to drop in after the surfer caught the wave on the lip, and as the surfer started to turn into the bottom turn, it was believed that the weight on the nose would help the momentum and produce more drive for the surfer. I'm not sure if that was the case. The underground story was that these receptacles were used to smuggle hashish back in the 70s. Okay, that's it. I have the Johnny Gale Mike Hynson North Shore gun showing the rail design with the turn-on rail all the way up into the nose of the board. This allowed for much better control in a tight turn in a pit of Sunset or Pipeline. And both Dick Brewer and Gerry Lopez credit Mike Hynson with this revolutionary design feature in the year 1969. Okay. Both of these late 1960s pocket rockets, both made in Hawaii, look very similar, but they're very, very different. I'm going to first show the pre-1969 S-rail of a country surfboard with the green psychedelic acid splash design shaped by Mike Turkington. Not only does this particular board feature a extremely radical kick nose, but it also retains the earlier S-rail line that I earlier described, with a boat nose for getting into the wave, but one which was not particularly useful for turning or for holding the line on a very steep face. Reno has had a bunch of these kind of boards. They're like narrow tail, white in the middle. That's right. He had a white one with a red top in 1968. He used to surf Makaha and Ala Moana area with it. Now the next one I will show you was made on Kauai by Dick Brewer and glassed by Skip Harmon in Lai-Kwan. This Dick Brewer Garden Owl Surf Shop board was made in 1969 or 1970 because in 1968, throughout the entire year, Dick Brewer did not shape boards of this particular rail design. It would have been in 1969, probably middle and later, and perhaps 1970, that this particular surfboard was shaped on Kauai by Dick Brewer. In 1968 and 1969, Dick Brewer had been using the Inter-Island logo for certain surfboards that were made in California and some in Hawaii by in the Gordon and Smith shop. And this particular one is what's known as the disc or flip nose model of late 1969, and there's a famous Surf Magazine ad featuring a yellow disc with Reno Abellira holding one under the Huntington Pier. The reason that I can date this particular piece to pre-mid 1969 is because it still features the boat nose, non-turned down rail in the nose. Around December of 1970, Reno Abellira and I think perhaps some other Hawaii people and Dick Brewer and Al Chapman were experimenting with a prototype three-fin board. Ben Ipa, Bob McTavish of Australia, and the shapers and designers in California also took note. And this is an early version of the experimental three-fin board. Dick Brewer told me that this was made in December of 1970 or early into spring of 1971. This particular board features the Lai logo that Gerry Poplar designed for Dick Brewer. And it has an early number, RB for Dick Brewer and Sunset Beach, number 10. The other thing about this particular board is that it features a narrow concave in the bottom of the nose, which allowed for less resistance and easier paddling on a steep face. When you start your turn with the small narrow concave, and this is still used today in modern longboards by some designers like Mickey Munoz on its 10.6 SurfTech model. There's less drag when you set your edge because the middle of the nose is virtually not there and invisible to the water. In early 1971, Jack Shipley and Gerry Lopez founded a new surfboard company called Lightning Bolt, and shortly after starting the company, they brought on Tom Parrish, and these are samples of a Gerry Lopez 8-foot pipeline gun, a Tom Parrish 8-foot sunset gun, and a 7-foot 2-inch or so Hackman Parrish design. Hackman surfed both for Dick Brewer as well as for Tom Parrish. This is an 8.6 Tom Parrish sunset gun that I have, and I have another piece that I'll show you. That's another three-fin Brewer. This is another early 70s Dick Brewer experimental tri-fin. It features a very rare handwritten logo. I have only one of this particular design. And the bottom shows the remnants of the experimental three-fin design about which I spoke earlier. One fin is missing and needs to be restored. Next. That's pretty